Right, louder. Now it works. That on-off switch thing. Well, welcome everyone to our 44th annual summer session. I'm Dexter Marr, and I'll be your MC for this evening. The summer session has been going on for many years, and very successfully to help share the Dharma. And we're fortunate to have a esteemed teacher and scholar be with us for this week. And before we start our class, we're going to have a short service so that we can express our gratitude for this precious moment, that we can come together and share the Dharma and learn and try to put the Buddhist values and Dharma into our daily lives. So we'll be chanting Jusege in English. It's on page 117 of your service book, this red service book. There's a few, Piper has a few that I can pass over this side. There's one over here for those of you that don't have them. Raise your hand if you need a service book. Okay. So Reverend Kevin Kuniyuki, the director of the Buddhist Studies Center, will be our officiant this evening. The altar is to your right, so please just kind of swivel your bodies around. And then after the Jusege, we'll be doing the Nembutsu. Okay? please rise for the singing of the Nembutsu. Please be seated. For those that are visiting us, the chanting and the Nembutsu are really to share with each other this feeling of gratitude, for this precious moment of gathering together to listen and learn and share the Dharma, or the teachings of the Buddha. And next we will have a message from our Bishop, Eric Matsumoto.
Good evening and ekomomai. I'd like to welcome everyone, as Dexter had mentioned earlier, our 44th Annual Buddhist Study Center summer session, and extend a warm welcome, or more specifically, welcome back once again to our guest speaker, Reverend Dr. Kenneth Tanaka. I'm sure Sensei will share over this week what he will share with us, that is, will resonate with many of us. Reverend Dr. Tanaka is, I believe, one of the few individuals who truly understand our situation and circumstances regarding sharing Buddhism, and especially Shin Buddhism in America, in which we need to address or consider. Also the areas of focus. I can see this clearly when I look at the topics that he will cover this week. I believe he will share important insights, topics, and methods for us, which will help us individually, personally as individuals, but also ways in which we might be able to share the Dharma with others. And all with, I'm sure, his wonderful sense of humor. Thank you, Dr. Kenneth Tanaka, for traveling to Hawaii to share with us, including the neighbor islands. And again, I'm sure that we will gain many things from his presentations in Hawaii. At this time, I'd also like to very briefly thank the Buddhist Study Center Director, Reverend Kuniyuki, and his staff, Kerry and Reverend Furusawa, and many of the other volunteers like Dexter, Faye, Carolyn, David, Rod, Alan, and I'm sure there are others who also helped out so that this week would become a reality. But most of all, welcome and thank you to all of you who are gathered tonight, and also perhaps those who might be viewing tonight's session and the other sessions, and also attending the other sessions. For without your presence, there would be no summer session. And so thank you very much for taking the time and making the effort to be here. Last but not least, I'd like to take this moment to also express gratitude to all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion, Amida Buddha, who, as we just heard in the sutra chanting, vowed, "I have made unrivaled vows and will reach the highest path. If I fail in any way, may I not attain Buddhahood. Should I not provide to all for countless kalpas to come, aid in times of suffering, may I not attain Buddhahood. I will reach enlightenment, but unless my Buddha name resounds throughout the universe, may I not attain Buddhahood. By asking all of you to please join me in reciting Namo Amida Butsu, the Buddha's name that calls, and the Buddha's name which we call in gratitude. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you and welcome again.
In one of the aspirations we do at our Sunday services homages, there's a part of it that says it's difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One, and now we hear them. So that's what our real opportunity tonight is, to have that time carved out in our daily lives to share this time with a super, as our last summer session speaker from Nepal said, super duper speaker. Dr. Tanaka recently retired from Musashino University and is now available. We're real lucky to be one of his first big speaking engagements. But I learned at lunch today that he's a Northern California guy like me, and he went to undergrad at Stanford and also got his PhD at UC Berkeley before traveling all around the world to learn Jodo Shinshu. He was ordained as a Jodo Shinshu minister in 1978 and served at a Northern California temple before taking the more scholarly path. So we're very, very lucky to have the author of the famous book. I see some of them here, Ocean. And tomorrow night we'll have our Honganji bookstore open with selling books for those of you that would like to have a copy. And I'm sure he'll be willing to sign them for you too. So without further ado, Dr. Tanaka, welcome to Hawaii, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Okay, so okay. Okay. Konnichiwa. Oh, I forgot. We're in Hawaii. Actually, I flew in around yesterday around noon, and so I still am not fully adjusted, but I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Reverend Kuniyuki, Bishop Matsumoto, and the staff at the Buddhist Study Center for inviting me. I believe this is about my third time as a speaker at the summer session. And so, every time I come, people notice, oh, your hair is grayer and less. And it's true, I think I first came here when I was in my early 40s, and then 50s one time, and then about 4 years ago is my last time here as a speaker here. And I recall having a great time with someone who has left us, at least on this earth, and that is Dr. Alfred Bloom. And I worked with him at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, or I worked under him. But he was actually, very open. He was a senior professor. I was a junior professor. But he allowed me to do a lot of things without any constraints. And so I'm very thankful for his openness. and the trust in me to do the right thing. And so he passed on, last summer, and I was not able to attend the funeral. And so I want to actually dedicate this summer session to him personally. So he has meant excuse me, I'm getting a little moved. He's meant a lot to me in my life, and as I think back 4 years ago, there was, or even longer, where we had Dr. Bloom and then Dr. Sunan Kubose, and we had a panel discussion there, and there was a hilarious moment which I want to share. Dr. Sunan Kubose, if you know, he's even a better comedian than I am. I think he went into wrong field. He should have been a stand-up comedian. Have you ever seen him? Well, anyway, so he was talking about gratitude, which Bishop Matsumoto emphasizes, and which our tradition values very highly. Notion of gratitude. Gratitude is a very, very important thing. If you feel gratitude, you got it. No, you don't. It's so fundamental. But anyway, Sunan Kubose was talking about gratitude to his shoes. Because shoes we take for granted. We're always stepping on it. They're never noticed. And so he says we should do gassho to shoes. Gassho to shoes. He also talks about toilet gassho, but I won't talk about that. But he gassho to shoes, and it was really moving too. I mean, he says with conviction. And then Dr. Bloom chimes in. He says, that goes to the soul of our tradition. And I said, wow. I looked over and said, hey, pretty good. And we used to do this a lot in Berkeley. He likes puns, and I like puns, and so sometimes we're punny guys. Oops, sorry. But anyway, so I stepped in, and then when he said, this gratitude is the soul of our tradition, and I said, well, that one is a shoe-in for the best humor of this session. Yeah. And then the audience, somebody in the back says, yes, we have to always put our best foot forward. So I thought, and it was, and thank you for laughing, because when you try to, revisit, sometimes it doesn't go over. But this, that time, it was very, it was spontaneous, a feeling of joy and what I consider to be a spirit of Jodo Shinshu and Buddhism. There's a word that I like that Shinran Shonin talks about. It's in English, it will be something like pliable mind, supple or pliable. Like a bamboo. Bamboo is very thin, but it bends and it never breaks. And in a way, you're flexible, you're open, pliable mind. Japanese is nyu nanshin. It has a nyu is like ju, like it can be pronounced ju like judo. Judo you have to have a pliable body too. So I think Buddhism fosters this sense of pliable mind, and as an example of this is a sense of humor. And unfortunately, Jodo Shinshu doesn't emphasize it enough. I know some good ones, but it's so subtle that even my family, or maybe because it's my family, they don't laugh. So they said, oh no, you got to work on that a little bit more. But if we have time, I'll share that with you. They're great myokonins. Myokonins? These are wonderful enlightened beings in Jodo Shinshu. They're the enlightened beings of Jodo Shinshu tradition. And there are people like Genza and Saichi, and they're little, extraordinary, if you say it nicely, or a little kooky, if you say it not so nicely. But, they're spontaneous, and they have this natural sense of joy and gratitude, and their actions are quite, humorous. But I will kind of reserve that for later. Maybe it will entice you to come back tomorrow and the day after. Well, not too much reaction there. They're saying, oh, I don't know if I want to come back for them. Okay, so today's session is entitled, if you can look at your handout, and the whole session is entitled, Everyday Buddhism for a Happy and Meaningful Life. The 7 Stages of Shim Buddhist Way. And that's the overall theme. And today I want to look at 2 themes: how we look at life and how we deal with people and situations we dislike. And so the first hour we'll look at how we look at life. And I want to begin by sharing an experience that I had almost 10 years ago in Tokyo, Japan. By the way, I've lived there for almost 20 years. And so in a way, Japan has become almost like my home, though I do go back to California every year, 2 or 3 times a year. But anyway, I was on a train, Chuo line, going towards downtown Tokyo, and came to a station, and the train kind of stopped, kind of jerkingly stopped. And I said, oh, that's a little strange. And then, so the train was halfway into the platform, the station. And then all of a sudden, we heard the announcement, and it announced Jinshin Jiko. Jinshin Jiko is someone had, Jinshin literally means human body accident, which means like somebody jumped into the train. And then the station staff came around, and they're looking right under the car that I was sitting in. And I said, oh my God, oh, okay. I have another joke on that one too, but I don't know what I said, but I felt like, OMG, but I thought, gee, my train, but my car right underneath, and then, swarms of staff, they came looking from the back and the front, and they're saying things like, oh, they're trying to look for the body, and then 15 minutes, and all this time, everybody in the car was just quiet, solemn, and rightly so. You think about it, someone had jumped into the train, and she or he is right underneath. And then 15 minutes later, I looked over my shoulders, and the body had been pulled out while I didn't notice. And it was covered by a tarp, so we couldn't see who he or she was. But I could see the shoes. Shoes were those of a young woman. And I said to myself, oh, why would a young person, that young, had to do this? And then, being a parent myself, I said, gee, how would her parents think? And so anyway, it was quite, experience that I would never forget. And at that time, it confirmed my conviction that I want to do more to teach young people about Buddhism, which I was doing. But it gave me more of a motivation to do that because hopefully, maybe, just maybe, that by talking about life and some philosophy, that we can prevent something like this from happening. And I told this story ever since to my students, 400 or 500 students that I taught every year. And I said, life is a bumpy road, life is tough, and sometimes you may even, ponder about taking your life, but do not, just think about the teachings that we're talking about and know that life can be fundamentally great. Life is positive, but at times, things just don't go our way. But don't give up and change your mind and look at what we're talking about. And so that's my fundamental attitude towards talking about the Dharma. And of course, for myself as well as the people who are willing to listen, that hopefully the Dharma can help us to become happier and to come to the realization that life is wonderful, and it was worth being born as a human being, and that there's so much beauty and wonder in life, and that through cultivation we can be open to it. And so there's a lot of negativism in our societies, but I think the Dharma can really, show the better way to how we can live our lives. And so, and obviously, myself speaking, I was introduced to Jodo Shinshu at the age of 13, and ever since I have pursued this path. So, like many of you, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is part of my life. But at the same time, Buddhism is my religion. And so I have tried to kind of paint a big picture of what especially the Shin path is about. And so I have, as I have in the overall theme, the 7 stages of Shin Buddhist way. And this is really kind of refining what I wrote in the Ocean book. If you read the Ocean book, the front part, there is that a story of a drowning sailor. And actually the cover of the book, it illustrates a sailor who was, that very sailor. And that actually is, I don't know if you ever noticed, but that is a cake, a sheet of cake. And so it's a decoration on a sheet of cake. And so someone did a really wonderful job. Yeah. And so I said, you did a great job. And the baker said, oh, piece of cake. That one, first time I ever told this, So it's not always rehearsed. It's a piece of cake. But I was amazed because actually the baker in Sacramento was told the story by one of the participants who attended, and he or she, whoever, went to the baker and said, here's the story that this minister told, and then the baker just heard and then decorated it. So it's a wonderful job. So anyway, and on your 3rd page of your handout, you have like a cartoon, 4 frames. And sorry, it's in Japanese. I didn't have chance to translate into English, partly because I wasn't going to present this, but it just dawned on me this morning, and so I contacted my minister friend who does this for me, and so he sent it to me right away. Anyway, number 1 is, so if you can look at the English part of it, and if you can share, look at the cartoon part of it. So there are 7 frames, or 7 stages, I'm going to call, okay? Now, you've heard of a very famous Buddhist parable similar to this. Well, I don't know if I can even equate it with that. It's called the 10 ox herd story, I guess. Jugyuzu. It's a Zen story about a shepherd who goes looking for an ox, and then it's a process of enlightenment. But it's kind of complicated, and it's not really Jodo Shinshu or Pure Land. So this one, I took off on that story and created these 7. And 7, because it's kind of a lucky number. That's kind of, American cultural bias in a way, I guess. But rather than 10, 7. So the first one, a man. Okay, this guy is, looks like a child. So actually, I have different versions of it. The one that I should have brought is much better. But anyway, pretend that he's a, kind of big and rugged sailor. Okay, so he gets on a boat from a port. I imagine it to be somewhere in South Pacific or some, more like Hawaii. Kind of, it's warm and it's, And then so few hours later, he and his buddies are out on the deck, and the boat shakes, and he is thrown overboard. The ship, people didn't see him or them, and so they just go on. So, that falling off the boat is number 2. Okay, all right, and then and each has its significance, but I won't go into it in detail now. I'll just tell the story now, and then each of them I will discuss as we go along throughout the summer session. And so falling off the ship is number 2, and number 3 is swimming to reach the island. So here, he's struggling to go to an island that he saw a couple hours ago, and hoping to, get there, and that becomes his aim, that becomes his goal. Unfortunately, he's kind of lost his sense of direction, and but he, uses his sense and he figures maybe it's in this direction, but he's not certain. Number 4, at the bottom here, as he is swimming for several hours, even a sailor, he gets tired, and then he starts taking on water, and he starts feeling himself sinking, and he says, "Oh no, this is the end." But just at that moment, he hears a voice from the bottom of the ocean saying, "Let go, and be just as you are." And it's the, well, I take this as the calling of Amida's calling. And so he said, "Oh yeah," and then he turns over and he lets go, and then he finds himself floating, okay? And he is saved. So this is the floating part. And in Jodo Shinshu, this is equivalent to what I call Shinjin awakening, Shinjin realization. And then after that, well, there is a great joy. Number 5 at the top is big, sense, expression of joy. And that's the part that we also need to emphasize. Gratitude is one, but also a sense of joy. And there is a sense of joy for someone who has arrived at this Shinjin realization. And then the problem is that you can't stay right in the middle of the ocean forever. He has a family, he has a job, and he wants to go back. And so he starts swimming again in number 6, okay? And swimming with ease. So actually number 3 and number 6 are same action. He's swimming. But it's a world of difference between stage 3 and stage 6. Okay, since some of you may not get the picture, I draw my usual terrible illustration. Okay, so sorry. Yeah. Just ignore just get the intent. And then he turns over and big smile. Okay, big smile. Well, no, actually, next one is joy. So actually, this bigger. Okay, and then he swims. And then let's just go over here. This is the island, and he reaches the island. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. No, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so and this part is after a realization of Shinjin. He is swimming just like before, but he has confidence that he will not drown. There's a sense of ease and sense of security, assurance that he will be okay, and that is really important. You still have to swim. You can't just stay here and you swim. And then you get to the island, and the key part is that once you get to the island, and it's almost like reaching the Pure Land. But what happens in Jodo Shinshu is that in the Pure Land you don't stay there. What do? Then you go out back, and this time the sailor gets on a small boat, looking for his buddies, with whom he was on the deck, and hoping that maybe he can find them and tell them and inform them of how to deal with the situation. So effort to benefit others. So Buddhism cannot end just with one's own salvation. That once you have found yourself and come to realization, then you want to share that with others. That's a natural outflow. It's not something that you contrive to do, but you want to do it. And that's, in a way, a sign of awakening, that you want to do for others without seeking benefits for yourself. So that's the overall story, okay? All right. Okay. So today I want to focus on number 1 first, boarding the ship. And what does that signify? Boarding the ship signifies that, in my view, that we were born as a human being. We received life, and we got on the boat, and we are proceeding to our destination, whatever our destination may be. And so now, in that process, I think for us, how we lead our lives, we have different philosophy, different ways of living our lives, don't we? If we were to focus by focusing on the issue of religion, we have people who think religion is important, and others those who don't. And obviously, those of us who are here, we consider religion to be important. But religion is a funny thing. Religion has different dimensions, different kinds of religion. And so I just wanted to kind of, under 4, talk a little bit about different kinds of religion and what religion means to different people. First of all, role of religion, there's, I think, basically 2. I have A and B. The A is a religion as merely an affirmation of secular life. Well, secular life means ordinary life. How we lead our lives, have a family, do our job, serve our community. So we can call it secular in a sense. Secular means there is no religious dimension to it. And many people live lives like that. And however, even these people, people like them, they do get involved in religion. They seek in religion. They see in religion something that will help their secular lives. So it's like seeking secular benefits by going to temple and shrines. And there's a tendency, unfortunately, in Asia, including Japan, for lay people to not really understand the Dharma very deeply. I think, Americans who seek religion tend to understand the Dharma, the teachings more. Whereas in Japan, you have many Buddhists, 80 million people call themselves Buddhists, but how many of them really know the teachings? It's just their family religion. So many of them go to a temple maybe only once a year on New Year's Day, mainly to seek benefits or to have blessings done. And so blessings, they think religion is something for blessing. And that reminds me of, even in America, there are some people who look to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism as a religion of blessing. So there was this reminded me of a friend minister who once had someone come to him, member of a temple, a church, and he had just bought a new car, and so wanted blessing. So my friend, the minister, said, no, we don't do blessings. But he was very insistent. So for pastoral reasons, he said, okay, if it puts your mind at ease, I'll do a blessing for you. And because he was concerned about the car being stolen or getting in a car wreck or accident. So he did chanting, and a very short chant, and the person went away, and he was pretty happy. A few weeks later, he came back, and he had gotten into a car accident, and he told this minister that, well, I got in a car accident, insinuating that the service or the blessing didn't work. So you know what my minister friend said? Oh, that was for preventing the car from being stolen and not for preventing you to get in an accident. So anyway, but he was, of course, kidding. And then he went on to explain to this member that religion isn't that way. Religion is not to seek benefits in that way or have magical powers like that. And so, what is then real religion? Real religion is fundamental change in our way of life, how we think and how we act. And it doesn't prevent difficult things from happening, although I think if you change your attitudes and improve the way of thinking, you have better relationship with other people, and life will be easier. But you cannot prevent, old age and illness and death and things that Buddhism is concerned about. So Buddhism helps us to foster the right mindset or change our mindset in our way of life. And so I think most of us here, of course, understand this, but there are many people out there who don't understand the nature of religion. So I think it's good for all of you to keep that in mind when you relate to people who are not very knowledgeable of religion, or may even be skeptical of religion. But I think Buddhism especially is a religion of change or transform the way we think. That reminds me of a famous American Buddhist joke, and you know this one probably, but I will tell it anyway because it's very good. So there was a Buddhist monk who wanted hot dog. Okay, so that in itself is a little weird because at least most monks are vegetarian, although monks are not all vegetarians. In Southeast Asia, they eat meat. Buddha ate meat. Only I think basically in Chinese-influenced countries, traditions that the Buddhists became more vegetarian. But anyway, so this monk wanted a hot dog, so he goes to the hot dog vendor, and the vendor says, "Sir, what would you like?" And the monk said, "Make me one with everything." I bet half of you got it, and half of you don't. When I tell this in Japan, nobody gets it. Unless they're really good in English. But anyway, so just to explain very briefly, and I won't go into detail, but one hot dog with everything on it, sauerkraut, that's the conventional understanding. The ultimate understanding is make me one with the universe, like with everything. So that's the aim of Buddhist transformative experience, nirvana, if you want to call it. So I think that's really great. I love this. But even better is the following, which has to do with change, okay? So he gives the vendor $20, and the vendor doesn't give the change back to the monk. The monk is getting a little antsy and little, what's the word? Patient. And finally he blurts out, he says, where is my change? And the vendor points to the monk and said, "Sir, the change must come from within." Yeah, this one is even better. I really like this. Here's this lowly, I mean not lowly, but a vendor, lowly in the sense of you have a monk who should be the one telling, he should be the one telling somebody, but he's being told by a vendor. So that's even better. So anyway, so that goes to the heart of change, okay? So I'm using the word change, but we're talking about, transformation or awakening, awareness. Okay, so various kinds of religion. There are now, so I think true religion are religions that bring about change, okay? But amongst religions, there are different kinds of religions. One is monotheism, okay? And which religions do belong to monotheism? Christianity. Yeah, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, yeah, and Jodo Shinshu. Nobody says anything? Jodo Shinshu is monotheistic, So says some people. I'm not saying that, but some people said Jodo Shinshu is monotheism. And actually, I thought you'd be more surprised that you hear something coming from out of my mouth. But this is the first time I said it, just to kind of get you to think. But first of all, just on that point, why people say Jodo Shinshu is monotheistic is that, Amida in the center, and there's no other Buddhas. There's Shinran Shonin, Renyo Shonin, Prince Shotoku, and the masters, And then most, kind of interestingly, there's no Shakyamuni Buddha. If it's Buddhism, where's Shakyamuni? He's nowhere to be found on the Onaijin. The only evidence of him are the scrolls, the rolled-up scrolls in the very front. These are the sutras that he taught. Okay? So, is Jodo Shinshu monotheistic? Well, I'm trying to look at Bishop Matsumoto and trying to think, trying to gauge his expression. But anyway, I'm just, the Buddha, Amida is certainly singular, but not God in a sense. And why is Amida not God? For one thing, he did not create the universe. He's not a creator. Okay? And Amida is not a judge. Amida doesn't judge, okay? And I think this is my more personal opinion that, as we can see in Shinran, monotheism tends to be exclusive, exclude other forms, other religions as not being up to par, or even worse, false. You know, Amida, or at least Shinran's understanding of Amida wasn't that way. You know, in the Tanisho, chapter 2, you know, his disciples go all the way from Tokyo to Kyoto to ask him questions. But in answering, he basically says, you know, it's up to you. No, you choose. If you think that there's a better teaching, go to Nara. There are scholars there, and go up to Mount Hiei. So, you know, he's not saying, oh, no, this is the only way for everybody. He's saying it's only way for me. And it may not be for you. If that's the case, go out and check out other religions. And so I think that openness is in Jodo Shinshu and Buddhism as a whole. And I think that's something that all of you can always take pride in, or at least you know, consider to be a strength of Buddhism. And when you share the teachings with others, you can talk about things like that. You know, the fact that Amida is not a creator, I like that, because I found that the God who created everything is you know, very powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, you know. But I've always thought, if he is so omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, why couldn't he have done a better job? No? Don't you think? I mean, you know, and people say, well, it's humans. People are the ones who cause difficulties in life. But who created humans? Hopefully, you know, I wish he had done a better job. Sometimes I do. I feel that. I do feel that. Why couldn't he have done a better job? You look at situations like in Syria, what is going on there, what is going on all around the world, and there are very, you know, heart-wrenching, you know, tragedies and sadness going on. Whereas maybe Amida is not as powerful, doesn't claim to do all that, and so anyway, I think Buddhism and religion, Jodo Shinshu is a religion of not monotheism, but awakenism. Have you ever heard that term, awakenism? Well, that's because it's used for the first time. I'm using it for I used it for the first time. I was just getting ready about 4 hours ago, and I said, religion of awakening and monotheism. I said, oh, okay, well, the awakenism. So it's a neologism, you know? New word that, you know, probably won't go anywhere beyond this room, but so awakenism, you know. So it's a religion of awakening, and the best and the hint of that is that, what does Buddha mean? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Awareness. Someone who has become aware, or someone who has become awakened. Okay, so this is so basic that Buddha is what we all want to become. Okay, all Buddhists aspire to become Buddhas, enlightened one, awakened one. That's the goal. Okay, and so Buddha means the awakened one, and that's why Buddhism is a religion of awakening. And so also recently, number 3, 4.3, religion of belief and religion of awakening. And there is a difference here, and in that religion of belief is well, let's talk about religion of awakening. Religion of awakening is a religion in which what is sought, what is requested, or what the aim is for the individual to have an individual experience of the sacred, whatever the sacred may be. So importance is well, some people say these are the characteristics of spirituality, which is a broader term. It's a broader concept than just even religion. It can even be non-religious. Flower arrangement, or even sports can have an element of spirituality. But so these 3 points, I think, especially what I consider to be more hardcore spirituality is we have element of individual. That it's you can say personal experience of the sacred. Whereas religion of belief, okay, so this is religion of awakening, but religion of belief is where a church or an institution tells you this is the way things are, and even though you don't have this experience of the sacred or individual experience sacred, as a member of the institution, you believe that to be true. And they may tell you how to, what right and wrong things are, and you believe and you follow accordingly. In some sense, it's comforting. It's easy. But you don't have the depth and openness to other people, I think, when you compare it to the religion of awakening. So I think religion of belief is limited, and whereas religion of awakening is a deeper understanding and realization of religious truths. And Jodo Shinshu can become a religion of belief, Just believe in the story of Dharmakara and simply accept and then just recite the Nembutsu. That can be kind of like a belief. Do as what the ministers say and the temple says, even though you don't really feel anything sacred, and you feel like you're doing the right thing. But true religion, and it can be, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, can be our religion of awakening, although some dimensions of monotheism, I think, can tend to be religion of belief. And so, anyway, okay. So I want to move on to the 3 treasures. And so these are, I talked about the religions as having born a human being. How do we lead our lives? We can become religious or non-religious. And if you're going to lead a religious life, there are different ways of looking at religion. So I've mentioned some of the different kinds and different approaches to religion. And so, but Buddhism is ultimately a religion of awakening, and related. And to go a little deeper, I'd like for you to open to page 2 of the homages or homages. And so we've chosen Buddhism as our guide. And then how do we see our lives? And, having born a human being, and as far as I can see, all of us here in this room are human beings. And that is something significant in Buddhism. And so, okay, can we read together the homages with the leaders? Usually the ministers read this part. But it's apparent. Okay, so hard is it to be, and I think today Dexter mentioned this, very timely. He didn't know that I was going to talk about this. But okay, 1, 2, 3. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear them. if we do not gain emancipation in this present life, we may not be free from ill-faring in the ocean of births and deaths. So we say Buddhism is a religion of awakening, and to kind of give a little bit more meat to that, when we recite this or hear this, first of all, we're at number 5 now. First is difficulties of being a human and in special quality. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but being born a human being is a rare thing. It's precious, actually. If you look at all the different creatures, all the sentient beings in the universe, it's rare to be born a human being. And Buddhism talks about how rare that is with an interesting analogy. Do you know the analogy of a floating wood and a turtle in the sea? The turtle in the sea, now I think it was 1,000 years that the turtle from the bottom of the ocean, turtle lives at the bottom of the ocean, okay? Every 1,000 years, he comes up to the surface. And then someone had thrown this wood with a little hole in the middle, like a donut, And the chance of this turtle in this vast ocean coming up to the surface once every 1,000 years, coming up the surface and poking its head right on this hole in this wood, floating wood, that is equivalent to the chance of us being born a human being. So I don't know if that makes sense. Well, it's a classical Indian story, and you may say, wow, or you may say, so what? But I think it's quite a bit, quite impressive. But more importantly, being born a human being, this is the best chance for you to become enlightened, awakened. And when you say, well, compared to whom? Compared to the 6 destinies, which are I think, and this is very Buddhism 101, so, okay. Heavenly beings, human, okay, what do you?
Fighting spirits.
Fighting spirits, okay. Well, or sometimes titans, spirits. And then animals, hungry ghosts, and then hellish beings. So I just want to compare us with the human, heavenly beings. We feel heavenly beings are better. They're better off than we are. In a way they are, because they don't have something. What is that something? Attachments or suffering. There are no sufferings, difficulties in the heavenly realms or heavenly beings. Everything is, always going their way. They're happy. They're always. But the problem with that is that because they're always happy, one, they don't appreciate what it means to be happy. They don't have anything to compare with, right? We can compare what happiness because we have suffering, okay? And then more importantly, because they're always kind of happy or, they don't have the urge to improve themselves and to aim for the ultimate goal of becoming Buddhas. Well, then you can say, well, why don't you just stay there? Because, it's nice. It's like heaven, always happy. Unfortunately, according to Buddhism, it's not eternal. Like everything else, it's impermanent. You will fall out of heavenly realm. And so the human compared to others, you have both suffering and joys. So you know what it means to be happy, and then all the more because of suffering, you want to aspire for the goal of Buddhism, which is to not to heavenly beings is nothing. It's not, as I just said, it's still part of the six realms, and that is not becoming. It's still inadequate. It's still a level of suffering, and so aim is to liberation. I'm using this word, but awakening, becoming Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, to transcend the six realms. And so being born a human being, on one hand, it's too bad you are entering the realm of suffering. But on the other hand, you have an opportunity, the best chance to realize full awakening, to become truly happy. So that is one thing to keep in mind. And so I want to try to bring it to a close. Okay. So what I have been I've been doing this for some time, but I draw this sketch, the vertical and the horizontal, and it's really been helpful. This is the horizontal axis, and this is the objective world in which we live. Our work, our family, our society. And most people just have this level. But as you can see here, it's up and down. You can say it's like a jet coaster ride, roller coaster ride. It's up and down, sometimes good, sometimes bad, And so if you only have this, you will be always, subject to your happiness is subject to what happens on the horizontal level. However, for those of us who find a religious tradition or a philosophical tradition or whatever, then this will help us to anchor ourselves, and as we climb, ultimately to become Buddha, and we cultivate ourselves by studying the Dharma and climb further up. And so this is the importance of the vertical or the spiritual path. And so some people feel that suffering is on this level, suffering, just suffering. And difficulties. Let me. So, if we understand this, it will help us a lot. At least help me. Actually, this truth I learned, or this truth was confirmed in the most unexpected of places, and that was in a public toilet graffiti somewhere in Central Valley many years ago. I was, I went to, do what I had to do, and then I look at graffiti, and it said, and I'm not going to write the whole thing, but just remember, okay? Difficulties are inevitable, but suffering is optional. And you probably heard this. I mean, it's been going around, but this was like I'm not 10 years ago, many years ago. So when I saw this, I said, oh yeah. And I had this kind of aha moment. And I feel this goes to the heart of Buddhism. that, old age, illness, sickness, not meeting up with people we don't like, people we hate, separating from people we love. These are the difficulties of life. But whether or not they become real suffering, that depends on how strong your vertical axis is. So higher up you are, then these bumps or these ups and downs will become minuscule. Just as an analogy, if you go up, on an airplane, 30,000 feet, if you look down, even Rocky Mountains become kind of like flat, right? It's not jagged, it's not up and down. But if you're on the same level, it's up and down, up and down. So Buddha is someone who is like 30, 40,000 feet high. And whatever happens, it's equal. I mean, he's not faced by it. But for us, because we're ordinary, foolish beings, which is fine, it still is up and down. Although I believe that what we call shinjin, a realization, which is Jodo Shinshu, awakening, I just put it shinjin. And you notice I use the word realization, and I don't have time to go into it, but often we translate it entrusting, which I told Bishop Matsumoto the other day that I think the entrusting is just one part of it, and it's not it's inadequate to express what shinjin is. Shinjin is really an awakening. It's kind of realization, and so we have to emphasize that. Otherwise, Jodo Shinshu is regarded as another form of Christianity, and I've been called Christian Buddhist, not because they knew my ideas, but because as soon as I introduced myself at a inter-school Buddhist council group, this lady who was a Zen teacher, she just said, you're the Christian Buddhist. This is a real story. And so I didn't have a chance to get back, to explain, but because the session started, and I wanted to get back at her, but I didn't have a chance to, but that is a perception out there. So if you think Jodo Shinshu, the aim, is Shinjin, which it is, and if you promote that as a simply entrusting only, that is problematic. And so, and then I better do very quickly this. Buddhism is a first-person religion, and it's not someone else. It's not for someone else. And there is a famous story, which parable that Buddha was asked, how large is the universe? Is the universe eternal or infinite? And he didn't answer. And a golden silence. And not because and so there was a person by the name of Malunkyaputta, and he said to the Buddha, I says, if you cannot answer these questions about how large is the universe, how eternal, and whether the spirit and the body are the same, or whether the Buddha, after he dies, continues on. These were the questions that Malunkyaputta asked or found that Buddha should be able to answer without just being silent. And the Buddha said, I don't answer these metaphysical questions because these are not germane to what we as Buddhists have to do. What we have to do is that we are like a man shot by an arrow, the arrow stuck in your chest. And then so the doctor goes and tries to pull it out, and he says, oh, wait, who is the guy that shot me? Was he tall? Was he short? Was he brown or fair? And was the arrow, what material was it made out of? How about the feather? Was it the feather of this bird or that bird? And he says, wait. And so the Buddha says, asking those metaphysical questions are like this man who's asking these questions while the arrow is stuck in your chest. The key is for you to pull it out from your own body. And so you are someone who is like the man shot by an arrow. And the most important thing in Buddhism is to pull the darn thing out. The Buddha didn't quite say that way, but pull the arrow out. And that is the aim of the Buddha Dharma. Not to ask these metaphysical questions, and which are, it's not a bad thing, but we need to turn our concern to ourselves. That's why we say first person. And often I get questions at sessions like this. They ask about, how about what can we do for the children in Syria and things of this nature, which are very important. Or they ask questions about difference between Christianity and Buddhism. These are important, but you have to always bring it back to yourself, because you are the man who is shot by an arrow. And what that means is something that we'll talk in our next session. So thank you, and this concludes session 1.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Okay, thank you, Dr. Tanaka. You've made it to our break time. Hooray! Just wanted to, if you're not familiar with the Buddhist Study Center, our restrooms are right through this door over on this side. Our refreshments are in the back, so please, enjoy yourselves. And we do have a sign-up sheet for refreshments throughout the rest of the week, so you can choose your day and help to treat everybody. Thank you all for turning your cell phones off. We didn't hear anything going on. And if the air conditioning is a little bit too cool, just let me know. These are brand new units that we just got in like yesterday that were activated. And so we're trying to figure out how to adjust them. So just let me know. And we'll reconvene at, let's say, 10 minutes after 8, okay, 15 minutes. And there's also a sign-up sheet for lunch or pauhana with Dr. Tanaka during this week. So, if you'd like to, chew in his ear a little bit, you can do so. As far as questions and answers, we'll try to do a little bit at the end of the evening. If you have something that you're interested in, if you write it down on a piece of paper, maybe we can collect those, and Dr. Tanaka can look at them. But we'll try to also have an open mic a little bit if we have time at the end. Okay, so we'll see you back here at 10 after 8.
Okay, we like to start.
One last thing. I find that I told my Reverend that a lot of my breakthroughs in my thoughts in school and in work, a lot of times it comes when I'm sitting on the toilet. My mind is free.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're going to start our part 2. So please gather yourselves and settle down. And Dr. Tanaka will continue the journey with us.
Okay. No, I won't. Okay. Is this on? Okay. All right. If you can look at the back part, the second section, we don't have as much time, so I want to go through quicker. This one, dealing with difficult people and situations, or the other phrase was dealing with people and situations we don't like. We all have experiences. And so, in our 7-stage story, the parable, this has, and I'm not going to draw, but it's when he falls overboard, that this represents he encountering a difficulty in life. And so Buddhism is a religion that really focuses on difficulties or suffering. And sometimes people criticize Buddhism as being too focused on difficulties and suffering. But that is simply a beginning and not the end. Ultimately, the result is the expression that you see on the face of the Buddhist statue. You've seen these Buddha statues. He has a very deep, faint smile, but you can see that there is contentedness and feeling of peace within, and that is the aim of what it means to be a Buddha. And even if we are not complete Buddhas, we can have part of that in our experience of Shinjin realization in this life. Jodo Shinshu is not a religion for only after death. It's what is more important is in this life we experience the Shinjin or something akin to it, or even an effort to seek it. That is important, and in that one comes to a sense of comfort and assurance. And the issue of Shinjin, I'll probably address it later, but for now, so the sailor falls overboard, and that's it's symbolic of meeting up with what we call suffering or difficulties, and these are explained in the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so I don't intend to go through the Four Noble Truths carefully, but you all know this, and so just going through briefly is we have first Noble Truth is that we all experience suffering. Okay, we all experience suffering. There's nobody here who has not experienced suffering. And so then he talked about, well, what are they? And he talked about 8 kinds. 8 kinds. And they are birth, aging, illness, death. These are the primary four. And then the other four, being separated from people and situations we like. We've all lost loved ones through, death or, moving away. The sixth is meeting up with people and situations we dislike. This is the one that we're focusing on today. And 7, not getting the sought-after outcome. We seek for something, but we don't get the result that we want. And then 8 is being attached to 5, what I'm calling experiential processes of the self. This is a little hard to understand, but it's often called the 5 aggregates or components or elements. But these are basically 5 processes of our experiences, which I will explain at the very end. So, and why we suffer, the cause of suffering is number 2, and the cause of suffering are expressed in different ways, but here we say 3 poisons. These are the defilements or karmic evil, or we use different words to explain it. These are the reasons why we suffer. And because the Buddha doesn't have no longer any of these 3 poisons, that he or she doesn't suffer. As simple as that. And what are the 3 poisons? And I don't know if you use this acronym here, but I know they use it over there in California. But gas. Aim of Buddhism is to release gas. Oh, don't do it here, please. I've changed the A to not anger, but word a little bit more difficult word, aversion. I think it's more accurate rather than anger. Actually, aversion includes anger and hatred. Okay? Now these two are not the same, anger and hatred. Okay? Because we get angry at our kids, right? But we don't hate them. Some people nodding their head. But no, I don't think so. If it's normal relationship, parents don't hate their kids. They get angry all the time, and vice versa. But and then S is stupidity. Stupidity is not knowing how things really are. So aim of Buddhism, I said, is to become a Buddha. But another way of saying is to see and live according to how things are. Or you can say reality, how things are. That's what Buddhism is trying to get us to awaken to, how things are. And what are they? And I don't have it here, but what are they? How can you talk about them? When you tell somebody non-Buddhist, a Buddhism aim is to be awakened to how things are, or true reality. What do you say are those reality? And I usually, today I don't have it here, but I usually talk about the 4 marks of existence. 4 marks, and it's in my ocean book. But of the 4, the first one, simply put, is life is a bumpy road. Life is tough. Life doesn't go your way. That's the first one. Second one is life is impermanent. Life is change. Simple as that. And this is easy to understand. Even a scientific view would acknowledge that life is impermanent. And not only that, life changes much more quickly than you think or want, especially with aging, right? You all acknowledge, right? Have you ever looked at your new passport? Said, oh boy, I've gotten old, And then 10 years later, you get the older one and look at the older one, older passport, and say, boy, I was young. I always feel it. I kind of chuckle to myself. It's how true it is. And then the third one is all things are interdependent or interconnected. Things happen due to causes and conditions that are connected. So what that means is that you don't have control over it. That's one of the messages. Because interdependency is a positive thing, but things happen beyond just your control. So these are the three. And the fourth one is that despite all of this, life is fundamentally great. That's nirvana. Okay? So these are, I use these simple words to explain them. So please at least learn them, and I'll discuss them probably a little bit later. Life is a bumpy road. Life is impermanent. Life is interdependent. But life can be great. And so these are the realities, or how things are, especially the top three. These are things that we all know in our heads, but it's hard for us to really digest it. And you think it's somebody else who gets old, but you get old and you get sick, and we all will die. I mean that, and so in some sense, Buddhism is it may sound very harsh, but again, if you can awaken to that and live according to it, then you will have much more of a pliable and supple mind, because it's a religion of awakening. But if you're into religion of belief, then things are simple. Do this and do that, and this is how things are. Just believe. And it may be simple and comforting in some sense, but it's not completely comforting, and you are probably closed off to other people in other religions, and you may feel that you're the best, you're the only way. And so I think the religion of belief is limited. And so even though it's harsh, and even though it's hard to face reality, if you can do that, then you will be able to relate to other people of other religions, in a much more open way. And then you will have a supple and pliable mind. And then number three, Four Noble Truths, going back to that, is a cessation of suffering. And that's that life can be great, or nirvana, that, once you practice and make progress, in other words, going up here, this is the cessation of suffering. And how to get there, you have the path. You have the path. And we all know about the Eightfold Noble Path or Six Paramitas. And so this is just the overall framework that you should all know. And if you know this, and you can explain to other people when they ask, what's Buddhism about? And today, because we're focusing on dealing with difficult people and situations, we're looking at the three nature theory of the consciousness zone. Oh, there's a misspelling. There's a O between I and you. And Nestle. Consciousness. No ly needed. Sorry. So it should consciousness only. It should be consciousness only school. You know about this? I was not being very conscious when I did this. Applied to our cognitive and affective process. And so anyway, this is a three nature theory. It's very complex, and there are different interpretations of it, but I made it simple. And so we take, so event, and then wholesome and unwholesome view. So now this is more practical. Under this theory of three nature theory, it advocates that whenever we experience something, event or phenomenon, we have two generally speaking, two kind of views. Unwholesome view. So, and I'll give examples of it. But the key is not to go with this, but to shift to this. And that's the change that I mentioned earlier. So if you stay with this, you'll have greater suffering. If you move here, you'll have less suffering. As simple as that. And so let me take an example. Okay, there are 3 examples under 9, okay? Some examples. Death of my favorite grandfather at age 73. So this is actually an example that one of my students put forth. And, you know, he's a college student, so he's like, you know, 20 years old, or no, actually 19 years old. And he lost his grandfather at the age of 73. So he said, when this happened, he was very sad, obviously, and he was angry. And he says, why couldn't he have lived longer? You know, you're supposed to live, you know, longer than 80. In Japan, it has the highest, you know, longevity. Not highest, but almost the highest. I just learned that Hong Kong and Singapore somewhere is higher, but by only a little bit. But anyway, even in the U.S. too, people, you know, grandpas live often, you know, past 80. So he was very upset. And why did, you know, why was he taken away? And so, and then, but he was not, didn't have this wholesome view, or in a way, right view. From a Buddhist standpoint, what is the right view? That life is impermanent. And then actually, it has doesn't have guarantees. And so, and then basically, that as we talked earlier, the impermanence brings about this aging and illness and death. And so he wasn't aware of it. He didn't have the wholesome view. And so through shifting to this wholesome view, this event no longer becomes less an event that doesn't generate suffering. So it's simply put, we're talking about how to view and how to understand the situation or the event that is taking place. And so, and the other thing is that life is a bumpy road. Life doesn't go your way. And that's, we all know this in our head, but when it happens to someone close as your grandfather, then you lose sight of what is the reality. And so, so you shift in this three nature doctrine that rather, if you go this route, then this will become an event of great suffering. But if you shift here, then it becomes less so. So how about a colleague who tried to obstruct my American study tour? Now I'm talking about myself. I said earlier, you have to apply it to your own situation. And so for many years, when I was teaching in Japan, I took a group of students to our sister school, Mills College. And so it was the most rewarding thing, but it was a source of greatest headache because I had to fight the administration to get the funding, and it's all the worries. But still, I found it meaningful. So myself and another friend, a colleague of mine, we did this for about seven years. But in the process, things always didn't go our way, and so we had a colleague in our department who started to criticize what we were doing, and gave us a lot of hard time. So he had a little bit of quite a bit of power within the university. So he tried to undermine it, and it made it very hard for us. And even at one of the department meetings, he made fun of what I'm doing, and he says, "Oh, this is a Tanaka tour," in front of all the teachers. I was really pretty upset, because here I am, I'm doing it for the students, and here he's critical and then taking it personally. So then, so then I could have shouted back, and I could have, gotten into a more difficult, argument with him. But, being the good Buddhist that I am, things always don't go your way. Very simple, but, life is a bumpy road. You're always going to have people like him. I won't even using the word that came to me. So, and then I made an effort to work with him. Now, whenever you run into difficult situations, you have three options. This is nothing new, but you can accept it, right? You can just accept the situation. Don't do anything. Just accept the situation. The other one is leave. I could have just said, okay, heck with it, If I'm going to get criticized, I won't do it. I'll just quit. I thought about that too. And the third one is improve or, work on it. So these are the three options that, it doesn't have to be even Buddhist, but that, you accept the situation, you accept the difficult, like many of you may have the situation at work. You just simply accept it and just endure. Or you can leave. You can leave, quit, and go to another workplace. That's an option. You have that option, right? Or you can stay and then try to work it out, improve. And I managed to do that, and I think Buddhism helped me. He said, life doesn't go your way. And then also the other is life is interdependent, which means that I don't have total control over this program, that I have to depend on people like this guy and others to support this. So if I had it all my way, it would be easier, but that's such is life. Things happen due to interdependence. And so I worked it out, and actually he ended up going to on one of the tours with me a few years later, and I got to know him pretty well, and so we had a chance to talk, and actually it turns out he divulged a secret, which I know it wasn't no big deal for me. He says, I'm actually I'm of Korean background, and I didn't know because it was a regular Japanese name. And I said, yeah, okay. But I knew then that he wanted to share with me the difficulties that he had living in Japan, not being a Korean, of background. And so, for me, I didn't care, of course, but it showed to me, and I think he was trying to tell me why, he was at times difficulty because of his upbringing and the fact that he had to hide it. And so I was rather surprised that he was not, he wasn't open about it, because most Koreans living in Japan, they use their Korean name. But apparently in this case, I guess he had reasons to keep it concealed. And so that, I was glad that I was able to work things out and got to know him, and then we became pretty close after that. So the third one is a little kind of maybe frivolous, but it is important. Graying and thinning hair, a sign of aging. We all, especially we men, we experience this, and I'm getting kind of thin up here, and sometimes I'm thinking of maybe I'd switch to Judaism. This is my original. Yeah. I'm glad I'm getting. For some of you who are not laughing, you have that little cap that they wear. What? Yarmulke, yeah. And so, And then, so anyway, but, I look at myself in the mirror and, things start drooping and getting thin and gray. But what Buddhism has been always saying, life is impermanent. And things change and you get old. And that's life. That's reality. That's how things are. We know in our heads, but we don't really acknowledge it. But we do everything we can to stay young, and that's fine. I mean, you dye your hair and you do implant, whatever. It's okay. Yeah, I think it's fine. But just, don't take it too seriously. I mean, eventually, we, end will come. But anyway, knowing that life is impermanent and things, that it helps. And so all of us, keep that in mind. That's the reality, But you can enjoy it too. You can enjoy aging, or you can benefit from it. One thing that you can benefit is that you don't have to go to a haircut as often as before. Yeah, I used to go almost like sometimes even twice a month, I think, when I was, and I had really a lot of hair. I mean, if you talk to, I think good thing nobody here knew me when I was young, but I had so much hair that I would, do the Elvis Presley type. And then when we travel, we would have dep. We put the dep and carry around dryer, and we would just kind of, heat it up and have this really nice lock of hair. But those days are all gone. And it's okay, And the other benefit is that people will appreciate what you say because you look more, quote unquote, distinguished. Yeah. Well, Bishop now is becoming less thinner and little gray. And people probably say, oh, now he looks like the bishop. Before they said, oh, yeah. Anyway, so there are benefits, and we should be able to laugh about it. And I knew some, actually, Reverend Imamura, the Bishop Imamura, and whose legacy is so huge here. But I think their relatives, whom I knew, or their son Ryo Imamura, anyway, I think when they were Mrs. Imamura too, they were having aging and they were going through a lot. I remember Mrs. Imamura and was kind of laughing about it. This here we go again, and kind of taking this aging and difficulty, with a sense of humor. And I found that to be, well, that must be a sense of kind of deep, awakening, realization. And so I wish I can do that. And obviously, it's not going to be possible to laugh at it because when things get tough and, we dementia and all the, physically you can, it's not easy. But at least have this teaching in mind and it should help. Okay, and then finally, living in the age of Donald Trump as our president. Well, I don't think I'm going to deal with this. No, I don't have enough time. But, well, some of you may like Donald Trump, but I'm only expressing my own feelings. I just think that, especially with regard to environment, he is very detrimental, and his actions, And so I used to watch CNN. Even in Japan, we can get CNN. And I used to enjoy it. But nowadays, it's kind of mixed, mixed feelings that I have. Well, when it's bad of me, but when things are not going well for him, I want to watch. When things are going well for him, I turn it off. But, I have to, then my unwholesome view is that this is my belief that I don't agree with his policies. And so I get angry or I get disappointed when he is in power. But I have to turn over here and accept the fact that he was, he was voted in. legitimately, even though the popular vote is less. So it's interdependence. Now, as things happen to causes and conditions, and those causes and conditions made him the president. So we just have to, kind of don't get too upset over it, just have to accept it. And what I can do is continue to help the group that I feel is more akin to my way of thinking, and remember the Buddhist principle of impermanence. He ain't gonna be around forever. Okay. Well, anyway, this is, I personally brought this issue up, even though some people might say, well, don't talk about politics in the religious setting. But politics is an important part of our lives, and from a religious standpoint, we should be able to turn what we consider to be negative into a positive, and to continue, not to get, not to suffer needlessly. If we cling on to the notion that, well, he shouldn't be, he doesn't qualify to be, he doesn't seem presidential and all that, then you'll forever be always, upset. And so, we don't want to suffer. Okay, so finally, I don't know, since I have this here, I think I better talk about it, because otherwise you probably won't be able to go to sleep wondering what this is all about. Okay, this is these are the 5 skandhas, which I'm calling it experiential processes, and I think I say intention, response, maybe also intention. So this is my creation as a kind of a teaching technique, and so 5 skandhas are usually taught to show that I is a composite of 5 elements, or 5. So I don't use the word element. I use the word processes, because I think it's more. At this point it's more accurate that second by second, every second, we are experiencing this process. So form 5 skandhas. 5 senses: what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and what we touch. These are the 5 senses, right? Those are the gates through which we experience it outside. So that's what they call it, form. But you can say 5 senses. And then to that you have feelings of like, dislike, or neutral. So you meet somebody and you see that person, or you may shake hands, and so through the sense of touch and sense of sight, and sense of hearing, you see and experience this person, and then you have a feeling, oh, I like this person, or maybe not so much. So you have this process going on. To that, you have thoughts. You kind of evaluate that person as an idea, as a concept. Or you may say, oh, and if this person happened to have a beard, wearing a beard, and no offense to people with beard here, but, and you may have a thought like, oh, people with beards, they're a little, unusual, or they're not conforming enough. And so these thoughts are necessary, but it's necessary for us to function in the world. But from the Buddhist standpoint, it is it's discriminatory. It's in Japanese, it's hakarai. It's dichotomizing. It's attachment, and so it creates sometimes a negative result. Now, to this, you have a response. Okay, so you meet this guy with a beard, and you have this thought that they're not your. You have a little problem with them, so you may not stick around long enough to talk to this person. You may just leave. That's your response. And consciousness is you are aware. It's a function that makes you conscious of all these forms. So now, traditionally Buddhism, it doesn't go more than that. It says that our experiences are comprised of 5 functions or processes, and these are always changing. So we always say no soul, right? Buddhism. We don't believe in a permanent soul that continues. But instead of a soul, often there's a sense that this 5 skandhas will continue as a process, but it's changing all the time. But it's not unchanging soul. And so Buddhists are sometimes considered not to believe in soul. So that's why there are no Buddhist rhythm and blues Buddhists. That's an old one. Why? Because Buddhists got no soul. So anyway, no. Okay, so okay, and then the most important point is that this part is related to here. Going back to this, so my colleague who was giving me a hard time, and then I had a bad feeling, and my thoughts are that why is this guy giving me a hard time? He must have had some that he probably had reasons to be that way, and so and then I was thinking this unwholesome view of, but when I experienced that at this level, you experience it, and then at this level, this is more of from here. You're on this side, and then. But if you have the Buddhist perspective or Buddhist aim, then you shift to the wholesome view, which is to take this response or intent to what you have experienced or thought in a Buddhist way, and then your mind will become have less suffering. So I'm using this as a this is not just the way when we process our what we perceive, what we feel, what we think. If it's a un-Buddhistic or unwholesome view, then what you need to do as a Buddhist is to try to shift to the wholesome view, but it's not easy because unless you cultivate yourself, you get inundated, or this is so strong that you can't resist it. But through effort, climbing this path, you'll be able to change your response to a more positive or wholesome approach. So, just to give you an example, if right now, if some guy came running in from the back door, and he's not dressed well, he's yelling something that is intelligible, and he has a stick and yells something, then obviously we see, we hear, and then our feelings are one of shock or fear, and then our thoughts are, well, this guy is probably deranged, or he's not your normal person, and then our response would be to maybe stand up and run away, or maybe someone else might go up and try to fight back. But anyway, we'll probably feel kind of fear. But if we had the Buddha, if there were a Buddha here, Buddha would probably feel and hear the same things, but his response would not be just one of, I don't like him. His response would be one of, well, he is a human being, a fellow human being, and he certainly wouldn't run away or try to fight back, but he would think, well, he's one of us, and there may be something, that I can help. And his response be one of more compassion. He would go up to that man and say, well, can I do something for you? And so he doesn't have suffering, whereas most of us will be in fear. That is because our thoughts response is not enlightened enough. And what determines that is this consciousness. And I'm kind of interpreting this more non-traditionally, but we talk about yoga consciousness only school. That school developed a little bit later, and they even go to talking about unconsciousness. That is where all the experiences are deposited, or memory. So our memories, our thinking, our consciousness. So whatever we feel, especially these thoughts, these determine our consciousness. And then this will determine how we feel and how we think and how we respond. So it's a mutual thing. And so that's why through cultivation, you try to bring this consciousness to a higher level. Then the difference that you just saw between us and the Buddha, you can see it because the Buddha's consciousness here is much more enlightened. And that is why he will respond in a much more wholesome way. And so, but you can use this as when you meet somebody that you don't like, and sometimes you cannot catch it because you're not turning inward. We're always, there's so many people who just look outward and think suffering is out there, but suffering is actually in here. Or joy and suffering are subjective things, not objective things. So the more you are able to look within, you can see how your mind is operating, and then you can maybe stop it. When your wife tells you something that you don't like, and you can say, "Ooh, I heard it. Ooh, I don't like it. She's telling me what to do again." But if I am here, I will be able to put a brake, stop, and I said, "Okay, dear." Yes, dear. Well, that reminds me, and I'll conclude with this. In Canada, at a gathering like this, there were young minister from Japan. During the break, he came up and I said, "Oh, he has a question about the doctrine." Then he says the question was, "What is the secret to marriage?" The young guy. So I said, "Well, and then I kind of told him my experience, but I thought I'll just ask the audience. I said, "Oh, by the way, during the break, this young minister from Japan, he was asking, what's the secret to marriage?" And then right away, this middle-aged lady in the audience said, "Yes, dear." And there is a lot of truth to that. I was trying to do our President Trump. He says, whenever he says something, he always says, "That's true," or what does he say? He says, "Everybody knows it's true." Well, anyway, okay, so a little bit time for a question and answer. Yeah, question?
Anybody? Anybody have a question?
Oh, okay, here.
There's what you just described is what you just described. I know when I was working, we're talking about in management ladders,
It's not on?
ladders of inference,
Oh,
ladders of inference, which is what you just
ah,
described.
I see.
You start off with your basic upbringing and your, and I wondered, have you thought about those ladders of inference? Because you immediately climb that ladder with your prejudices based on your, what is it? Your feelings, your beliefs, your thoughts and beliefs, and trying to keep a Buddhistic view of that based on those feelings requires you to be so open and asking questions before you respond, I guess, before you come up with some kind of response. Is there a way to I'm trying to figure out how do you explain that?
Well, this is, not a perfect way of capturing some of the subtleties of how the mind works, but it gives you a general tendency of, and so the inferences that you talked about, maybe the inferences are actually in your consciousness here, and they impact the way you think and how you respond. So I would probably put it here, but the key here is just get a general feeling of how the mind works, or how we, well, they call it maybe epistemology. You know, how we see things and how we interpret it in our mind. And this is just Buddhism goes into much more depth, especially the consciousness-only school philosophy. But this is, I'm using a basic early Buddhist doctrine to talk about something that is much more complex. But main thing is, the key is that you can change the way you look at whatever experiences that you're encountering. That's the key. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I don't know if that mic is working, but. Oh, it does. Oh, okay. So.
Hello.
Hello.
You mentioned 3 difficult situations: accept, situation, leave, or improve. If we accept the situation, does that are those 3 options something that we can stay in, or we try to go to the 3rd option, or even the 2nd?
Well, I think at any given time you have these options, and you can try to accept, but maybe later on you won't be able to, endure it, and then you can go to the 3rd option. But at any time you have those 3 options, and you may change later. Yeah. So I don't know if I.
Well, I'm thinking if I have a situation, it's something small, not just aggravating maybe, but enduring it is okay.
Oh.
And
Okay, if it's okay, just endure it.
but in a way, I would rather solve it
Well, then
in a better way.
Well, then you have the 3rd option of improving it or changing it.
But at the same time, if I do the 3rd way, it might create more dissension between us.
That's the choice that you gotta make. Yeah, that's the choice.
Depends how I
Life is a
handle.
bumpy road.
Yes, dear.
Yeah.
Lucky it's not my wonderful spouse. But yes, dear is a very famous word in 2 phrases in my life, and that has really helped me.
No, wait a minute. Is the lady next to you? Okay. I'd like to hear your side. Do you have anything to share?
She probably will say, it's not true.
Whatever I say is because I want to help him.
Yeah.
Really, it is.
Yeah. So,
No sugar, like he said, no sugar, more vegetables. And
yeah. So, okay, so on that sugar and vegetable, and it's so you want to have sugar but no vegetable. So you're being practicing S of gas. Right?
Right. I give out a lot of gas.
Yeah. And we all do that. We want, because, we know what is good for you, but we're too stupid to always follow that. And I struggle with that all the time. Yeah. So that's why maybe if we're in a religion of belief, that, the church told you no sugar whatsoever, just vegetables, would that be better?
Not for me.
No, not for me. Yeah. So that's why you're lucky to be in a religion of awakening. that you would struggle, yeah. But it's a human struggle, and it teaches you about yourself, and come to the greater realization that, I know what is good for me, but I don't practice it, so I am an ordinary foolish being.
That's what's so good about the religion.
What?
I'm a foolish being. That's
Yeah.
good.
But foolish being supported by compassionate forces around you, including ultimately Amida. But closest to you is your yes dear. Yeah, one of the things I really feel is that we talk about vow power and Amida's vow and Amida's working and other power. Ultimately, that's the ultimate source. But what I feel most close to my heart are those what I call everyday compassion that expresses all around me, and including the mental and spiritual support of my yes dear, or my family, my friends, my temple. These I think we should take to be expressions or manifestations of what we call the other power or the vow power. At the very foundation, at the source, which we cannot fully comprehend, is Amida's vow. Is working to make us awaken to the truth about life, which will make you happy. So I think we should talk more about the tangible examples and manifestations of the vow. Yeah, and then I feel it like this water. Whenever I drink this water, I said, "Oh, this is liquid diamond." Not all the time, because I'm more bombu too. But I feel that very much. It's amazing that we have a substance like this that nurtures us and supports us. Without water, and food, of course, and oxygen, and so like that hot dog joke and the monk, make me one with everything. Actually, we're one with everything. We're all already, yeah. So we just don't realize it. And the more you realize it, you cannot help but to say Namamida Utsu if you're Joro Shinshu. And because ultimately it goes to Amida. And that's how I appreciate the great compassion of Amida, or what we call great compassion, what we call Amida, to be more, we can appreciate better through something that's more close to us and tangible. Yeah. So every morning when you see your wife, you can kiss, but gasho.
My Amida.
She's gonna hold you up as a hero.
I have a question, but first I wanted to mention what one of the older guys at the Hongwanji showed me. He showed me that when you get older, you get this thing in your ear called a hearing aid. And he says, the beauty of marriage is you just turn it off.
The hearing aid?
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you who it was, so, but that's what he told me. He turns it off when I ring the concho bell too, but you know.
I see.
It's the beauty of it. But in any case, my question is, I guess I deal with this a lot. It's kind of a moral question, because some of the things I see is they want to do things a certain way. It's not engineering correct, and it could be dangerous. Sometimes I have to put myself on the line. I told him I'm going to go and make this a public issue, because otherwise we might have a situation like the Florida Bridge, And we came close to some of that stuff. But, and that's why I don't move up, because I always will say that the emperor doesn't have clothes or something. But so I come into with this kind of moral dilemmas, because I see the problem, but yet people don't want to let it make the correction because they have friends or something, because there's corruption going on, or someone's getting paid extra for it. And this happens a lot right now. It's the worst I've seen it. But in any case, what it is I think it's more than just those three options: accept, leave, or improve. You cannot just look at that. When you see something that's of that kind of magnitude, you have to, I think we owe it to everyone else. Yeah. And then looking at the impermanence or interconnectedness of things, that we're supposed to take a stand, not just for moral issues, but also for interconnectedness. But, when you start...
Okay. So I think what you're talking about is here, right? So you can go ahead and improve the situation, but just know that there are consequences when you go up against the establishment. And so are you willing to do that? And so hopefully, if you are, someone with, idealism, that you will do it, but, there may be consequences. And then, as we all know, great deeds are accomplished by those who made great sacrifices. Mm-hmm. Well, look at Buddha. Buddha is a good example. He abandoned his family, but he left a teaching that impacted millions of billions of people throughout history. So, it's sometimes tough, but.
Well, I have to choose my battles. Even though I know some stuff was wrong, I let it go because I know it's not going to have a problem now, but it's going to be a major maintenance problem later.
Yeah.
But the other
thing.
So
why don't you do that?
Well, I do, but then there's sometimes I'm putting myself out there too much, and I just feel like other people should do their share, and they say, Brandon's gonna do it, he'll see it, and I'm like, I don't always want to be the person. Then
okay, so I don't know the dynamics of it, but so you will then, how about getting some other people who think like you and work together? Now, you don't become the lone wolf, because you get all the blame and
I think that's what I think the problem with Donald Trump, it kind of like permeates everything, and then everybody starts thinking, we can get away with everything. But the other thing is, one of the good examples about how you handle these things is that you can do something, but just don't get your feelings into it. Like the good example that I was talking to you before about that Canadian trucking company that was trying to haul their stuff through the town, and it was dangerous, and that they wanted the Buddhist temple, didn't want them to go through. But they weren't mad at them. They were mad at they were upset at what they're doing. So they try not to get their emotions hooked up. But don't you think it sounds a lot like what is that stoicism?
Stoicism. Okay. Yeah. Well, but anyway, it seems like this is the realm in which you can do different ways, but you have to come up with strategies and maybe not get your emotions too involved. But it's not easy to do. But I think that whatever you can do, the aim of Buddhism is to minimize suffering. So it could be collective suffering, a company like you're talking about, but also, mentally too. So maybe if you go this route, you may not be able to handle it. If that's the case, maybe, you have these other options, you can leave too. But, you lose your job. I guess you got to find another job. So anyway, I think it's not easy, especially when you venture into the number 3.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow night and the rest of the week. And Brandon, if you want to go pauhana with Dr. Tanaka next door, I think that's an option for all of us or any of us through this week. So thank you again. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.